What happened to my connection?
Hello and welcome to today's live broadcast of Indian Time. I am Jessica McBride, Muskogee Media Coordinator, and I'm here with Gary Fife, our radio host and writer and everything else.
Yeah, resident Olga.
Well, today we're going to cover a couple of things, mostly concerning the 2017 Comprehensive Annual Budget Call. And we did receive a statement from Muskogee Creek Nation Principal Chief James Floyd regarding the Comprehensive Annual Budget. We posted that to our Facebook page and as well as our website. So if you need to see it and read the statement, go to our website and it should be there. And I'll go ahead and read his statement since we didn't get to cover that yesterday. It says the budget call letter, Executive Order 16-01, consists of two budget instructions for 2017. First, all programs and grants funded by federal funds will budget according to congressional appropriation law and guidelines. Generally, we would expect some increase on an annual basis or a continuing resolution at the current FY16 level. For programs funded from tribal funds, I have asked departments to prepare their budgets at 90% of the approved fiscal year 2016 level. Tribal funds are dollars generated from gaming, enterprises, or interest from invested tribal funds. Currently, we are projecting a smaller distribution of available funds in 2017, thus the request for budgeting at a lower level. The National Council is the final approval of allocations in the comprehensive budget. Again, federal funded programs and grants do not follow these rules. We received a statement on our Facebook page, or not a statement, a question, and it's asking about what about programs that receive federal funds and grants, and they receive tribal funding. And you can see some of that. We've posted the fiscal year 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013 budgets for the Department of Health. And you can see on pieces of the budget how those funds are allocated, and some of it is paid for with, tribal funds, with the third-party account, or with IHS federal funding.
And I just wanted to jump in real quick, Jessica, and bring this up. Speaking of questions, we're going to start taking the questions to the email you see at the top of the screen, jmoore@Muskogee Media. So if you have a question for us about any of the things we've covered on Indian Time every day, send them to that email. We'll have the email up and running while we're doing the stream, so you can send questions into that email. But you can also send questions into that email that you want answered on a future stream, or if we don't get to a question during the actual live stream, we'll try to keep a tally and keep bringing it up in the next stream to try to get answers to specific questions from citizens.
I think it's important right here to hit on a couple of points. First of all, federal funds are severely restricted in how you can use them. There are guidelines that say you say you're going to use the money for X, Y, Z. We want to see you use it for X, Y, Z, and then show me the receipts later on. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty clear cut. So there wouldn't be any chance of shifting money around out of a federal account into something else. If you do, you're not going to like the results. As a matter of fact, there's a tribe up in Northern Plains right now is under federal scrutiny for doing exactly that. And that could endanger their standing with the federal government in receiving future funds. So, there's no messing around with that money. So I think it's important in the next few days for us to be able to outline those programs that are federally funded, that are on safe ground. And then those that aren't, that are on tribal generated funds like this one. Now, the second point is that I was seeing is that we don't want to start a Chicken Little stampede of people. Oh my gosh, what happened there? Did somebody make off with all this money? Do we inherit that problem too? Well, in the second missive from the chief there, in the last paragraph, it says currently we are projecting a smaller distribution of available funds, which means we're looking ahead, and the money that we're seeing now may not be there next year, the next go around. So let's try and hold back off on another 10%. That's what I'm seeing there. If it's the case, that's what we have to deal with brand new programs or expenditures coming online, like the casino, that Margaritaville. They're going to have staff, insurance, supplies, inventory, the whole list of things they're going to have to spend money on before they can really start making money. And that's going to be just a bit of a drain, I'd say. But apparently the chief's office here is looking at that and saying, well, let's get ready for it just in case.
And that's something back at the end of last fiscal year in the previous administration, one of the things that was brought up when they were discussing the budget with council is that we would have a smaller amount of gaming revenue to operate on this upcoming fiscal year because they have to hire staff and get ready for the Margaritaville expansion. And so that sounds like to me, based on that, this is something that is anticipated. Tribal funds come from a couple of different places. It's my understanding we get, of course, gaming revenue to operate on. We also get revenue out of the tag office, any alcohol sales, any taxes that we collect, and that's used for our operations as well.
Right. One thing to note in what you had to say was the tax from license tags. And we've heard from Jerry McPeak that they are doing quite well there and then kicking back even a higher amount. That's not going to be a stopgap, I don't think, for the needs that will be coming, but at least that's a bit of good news that they're doing more business as an enterprise. And as far as anything else, we're going to have to see what's going on there, and if it's not producing, then we may have to look at terminating and moving on to something else.
Right.
An analysis of this, the economic strategy that Chief's trying to employ here too is, so he's not going department by department and taking each department's budget and looking at it and saying, here's where we can cut or here's where we can spend. He's going to put all of that responsibility on department heads or the people that are in the department that understand the department. And there is a situation where, so if what we're looking at right now, the 90% of fiscal year 2016, right? If your department didn't have any flexibility in it, kind of like how our department's budgeted. So we are budgeted to have the amount of money we need to operate for a year, and that's it. We reduce our cost down to only what we have to spend in order to keep the programs and the services that we provide running. So when we get hit with a 10% cut on our budget, we have to reduce our budget by 10%. We're really limited in how we can address that request. And so, and because the reason we're limited is because we were trying to save the citizens as much money as we could, by not requesting funds beyond what we literally needed. So, and then if you take the counterpoint of another department that would have, an extra 10-20% amount of money funds in their budget so that to make it flexible, so that department's not going to have a problem, but a department like ours is going to have a problem because we didn't have that flexibility in our budget, so you're kind of creating a situation where the people, the departments, whoever they may be, that are operating, beyond what are requesting budgets that are beyond what they literally need to provide services aren't going to be punished by this, but the departments that are operating strictly with the funds they need to provide the services will be punished because some of those services, they'll have to either cut into those services or personnel in some way, and it's going to be difficult choices for all the departments, really.
One of the things I did was I contacted the Public Relations Department, and we're trying to find out what departments are solely funded off of tribal funds. We know our department is solely funded off of tribal funds. We don't receive any federal money, any grants, anything like that. But some of our departments receive tribal funds and grants, and certain spending, will remain the same, of course, because they do receive those federal funds. But we're waiting to hear back from Public Relations to find out which departments are solely funded by tribal funds. One of the other things I did was, in some of my other research for other stories, I pulled legislation from National Council regarding the comprehensive annual budgets. And the last one that was passed for the 2016 budget, it has a breakdown of the budget and what came from federal funds and what came from tribal funds. The total amount for the 2016 budget was $292.9 million, and $188.8 million of that was from tribal funds. So over half of our funding is from tribal funds, such as gaming, taxes, etc.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Even departments that have large amounts of what they do paid for with grants or matching funds, if their personnel, most of their personnel is going to be paid through tribal funds because, typically the grant or the funding isn't paying a person a salary, it's paying to help for the raw materials or the equipment that's needed to do the job, and then the tribe typically provides the employee to handle that, or et cetera, et cetera. Like if you have, just for instance, a grant writer's position or something like that, that grant writer isn't going to write a grant to get paid. The grant writer is going to be already paid, and so that 10% is going to come out of that grant writer in this situation, right? Or their salary, if it's a personnel situation.
It varies from grant to grant. I mean, different grants can pay for different things. Some of the grants that some of the departments have received, actually pay for the salary. Some of them, we've mentioned matching funds. What that actually is when we apply for a grant, the grant dictates that, okay, you get $100,000 for the grant, and you have to put up another $100,000 of matching funds, of your own funds, in order to get the grant. And according to Chief's statement, those funds will still be there. We're still going to match those grants because we have to get the grant.
Yes.
It's odd that the philanthropic world works that way. Like, if you've got enough money here, then we'll give you some more money here to match that, so you'll have enough money. And that would be odd. Can you imagine a beggar on the street, holding out his cup and said, "Well, I'll give you $1 if you can match that $1."
Yeah.
Well,
kind of an odd way to go.
It is, and there's different grants. Some of them are full funding, and some of them are the matching. To kind of play devil's advocate with you a little bit, if you provide your $1 and they provide $1, you're more interested in making sure your $1 is well spent, so maybe you'll take care of their $1 too. And maybe that's their strategy. I have no idea.
You just have to listen to public radio, which is in a pledge week right now. And they have corporations that will match their employees' contribution kind of thing. But I think it's important to also add that, when we speak of grants, we're not talking exclusively federal money. There are a lot of private grant-making institutions around the nation, and some major monies are going to tribes for different various projects, like health and some media projects or education, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily all have to be, we have to go find federal money, which I would assume that there are some out there that we haven't tapped yet. So we'd want to go explore those and do a full survey of what's there and what we might be capable of, and where we could take up some slack.
There's all kinds of groups that provide grants. I mean, it's not just the federal or state governments. A lot of your private industry will provide funds here and there for different things. Charitable donation type of thing for them.
Reaching back in my own ancient histories, that was the success we had with National Native News. As it turns out, we couldn't get any federal money. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting turned us down and said they wouldn't fund a news service, which they promptly turned around and did for the Hispanics. Carrying a grudge a long time, but we were able to get monies from people like the MacArthur Foundation, and that was a major grant that had never been cracked before, I think, by any other Native group. And then we got some Johnson & Johnson money for some of the health programming we did. So, it's out there. There are things we can do. We just have to perk their interest and have some grant writers who are pretty good at what they do. I mean, that's going to have to be a necessity for us to try and make up some of this deficit.
Yeah, as far as our department is kind of concerned, we're funded fully on tribal funds, so we don't get any grants or anything like that. So with this FY 2017 budget, since we're going to need to make 10% cuts because we're funded by the tribe, we'll have to look at things, and it'll be up to our board. It won't be up to us necessarily on what ends up being cut, but one of the things that has been proposed is that we may have to take off, the TV show off of the CW, Tulsa CW, or we may have to take off the radio show from broadcast.
Right. Both of those cost money to do. We may have to explore some connection with public broadcasting for the TV programs at least. Right now, the radio show Muskogee Radio is tribally funded with buying time from 1240 The Brew downtown Okmulgee. They're the only game in town. We'll have to weigh the impact of losing that connection, that direct connection with local listeners. Because with that show, we try to, of course, get the information out that our people need, but also want to hear, and we can work to make it useful to the rest of the community, so we can kind of coordinate and work side by side with them. Say, hey, we live here too, and so that would be a possibility.
We have a comment in the chat, guys.
Okay.
Tom Burnett says, in the budgets, one of the source of funds is admin cost. Is this unrestricted funds?
Oh boy.
So he's asking about
admin. So on this piece of legislation that I have for the 2016 comprehensive annual budget, it gives a breakdown of estimated tribal funds and the revenue that we'll receive from that. And there is, in 2016, there was an estimated $17 million from the administrative cost pool. And I'm going to take a guess that that's what we're discussing here. These are tribal funds, and it's mixed in with like the motor fuel tax, expendable trust funds, taxes and license, gaming revenue, operating funds, health services funds, and it's my understanding that these are funds that are from the tribe itself, and that may actually be one of the investments that we have, and that may be the name of the investment fund. And so I believe we're able to utilize the interest off of some of those funds. Is that right?
Well,
and that would be where the revenue would come from?
Yeah, I don't know about the unrestricted funds part of that question, because that's what I'm thinking about is admin costs. I mean, most of those are going to be either, revenue from gaming, you know, because.
Well, it has gaming revenue as a separate.
Right.
So that
right.
I'm wondering if that's one of our funds, like the permanent fund, a portion of the permanent fund that's invested into a certain account, and then we use the interest off of that account, and it's called the administrative cost pool to try and fund administration.
That would be that we would have to have that explained. The interest that we earn off of the permanent fund is what they use. The council I'm referring to typically use for special appropriations, et cetera, different purchases. To my knowledge, that is not an account that the administration pulls money from. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think that's.
They've got a different section for appropriations, and then they've got they budgeted in for 2016 for special appropriations $5.6 million.
Right.
I don't know what the interest rate on the permanent fund
special
is.
Appropriation, it'll dictate, where that funding source is and everything.
Interest on the permanent fund is one we hear a lot through legislation.
Yes, and that's where you get into the citizen complaints about, is this a per capita distribution, et cetera, because of National Indian Gaming Commission's classification of per capita distribution. And any citizens out there that are interested in checking that out, you can go to the National Indian Gaming Commission's website, and they have a lengthy discussion about that particular issue. But that's where we get into the thorny area of, is something a restricted fund, or is it the money that's appropriated for this particular thing, is that allowable? And like when we researched that story, that's one of the things that we found is a lot of the onus on these particular designations are on the individual citizens of tribes to conduct actions in tribal court before the regulatory agency will step in. Sometimes that's not the case, but here he has more. He said, Tom says, on the first page of each of the Department of Health's budget, the first page of the budget is a summary of the budget. This is where the source of funds are shown on each program. So I see what he's asking. He's asking in the budget, when it lists source of funds is admin costs. I would say that is the executive branch's money side.
Right.
So they're designating
for admin costs.
Yeah, so they're designating that the admin cost that money is coming out of the executive branch, and then the other monies are coming out of, federal grants or federal monies, because they have to differentiate that on the budget side.
Now, it seems like the admin cost category is kind of like the low-hanging fruit. It's, I think,
well, that's where
rightly or wrongly perceived by the citizens as the kind of money that the executives might use for running their offices or travel or whatever else that they may use it for. And sometimes they're easy targets, saying, oh well, we got waste and excessive spending in here. Why do we need to buy all these blankets to hand out? Or
the 10% reduction would apply to admin funds. So admin funds should be reduced by the 10% from the fiscal year 2016.
But I was just saying that's the perception is like this is flexible money. This is a slush fund that they might be able to cut into without too much damage.
Well, and the feds probably don't have any say over how those admin costs are spent or anything else, whereas with the federal funds, there's a specific delineation of how they're to be used.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was talking about the tribal end of it, not the federal.
Right.
The usual federal grant has a built-in kind of a category for that sort of use, recognizing that you do have to buy a computer and print out paper, and occasionally you may have to travel or something like that. And discretionary funds like the tribal funding, that's where we can perhaps see a difference being made there. Maybe so many people won't be going on so many trips, or but as I say, that's the low fruit. That's easy pickings there. Where it will start to hurt is when we have to cut back on staff members who have to make the machinery of the administration work. It's like if we don't have enough administrative assistants, then these materials can't be processed and sent out, or can't be assembled or something like that, or we can't prepare for a major meeting or a major event because we just don't have enough people to get the job done.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'll be interesting too in future coverage of the health department budget, and with the 2016 budget and all the budgets that we've published through our website, is will those executive officers that if you go through those budgets you can see them getting pay raises of substantial amounts through those through those years, are those going to get taken back? Is that going to get reduced? Or is the number of executives going to go down? How is this going to be addressed within the health department? Now, I think there's kind of citizens might jump to the conclusion that the 90% reduction is related to the health deficit, and really I don't think that it is. I think that's, if you take the executive order for its face value, they're saying that they have a projected revenue the revenue is going to go down in 2017.
I think we might want to back up in there. You said a 90% reduction.
Or I'm sorry. It's 90% of the 2016
Right.
budget.
Yeah,
So
10% reduction.
Yeah, so let's make that clear before
sure.
we panic our citizenry.
But on the health side, as part of their deficit plan or however the restructuring or whatever chief does in there, because as we saw at the council meeting, he said he's going to come in and have experts or outside entities look at this and possibly audit it and try to make determinations of what can be done. That's one of the first things that we're looking to check, is to say, hey, well, like we in our research, we're seeing sequential increases of positions over and over and over again, whilst at the same time having revenues or having audits on file or being conducted that are saying this is no good, so it'll be interesting to see what happens next in the health department as far as, like we were speaking of admin costs.
Right. Now, we've heard propositions about reducing the space that health uses, getting rid of the Lackey Hall building and putting them in the soon-to-be unused spaces above the hospital, and closing an emergency room and things like that. Now, these are impacts, particularly the emergency room, that our people will feel.
Yeah. The only concrete things that we've really seen is reduction of hours, which is cutting a service. The EMS, which is what you're referring to, which is cutting a service. But we haven't actually seen any chief's office or health hasn't issued any statements saying that any executive pay is being cut, any executives are being downsized or anything to that effect, and we haven't been able to uncover anything like that happening yet. And it probably is too early for us to see anything like that happen, because auditors or analysts are going to come in and have to have time to do those things. But it's interesting that they're already doing some things, and those things are services.
And one thing to kind of clarify, especially with the former Okmulgee Memorial Hospital, which we got back in at the end of 2013, I believe. There is an emergency room there. Now, it's not, I don't believe like it's a high trauma or whatever, your health terms are as far as emergency rooms go. Now, a year or several months ago, we announced that we were going to do a brand new emergency room here in Okmulgee. And I believe that has been halted because of the need to go through and look at the health department and see what exactly we need and where we need to cut costs.
Darren and I were talking about everything's, they were doing construction work on Okmulgee Hospital, and now it's all shut down and the dirt has been filled back in.
And I believe it's the same thing with the new Eufaula Clinic. I don't believe they have actually started construction out there. Now, we had the groundbreaking about 9 months or so ago, but they actually have not broken ground on that facility, and I think that's been halted.
Yeah, and there hasn't been any statements released about either of these things. So, as far as we can go and look and say, well, maybe they're not, maybe they are, but the health system itself hasn't issued a statement saying, we're going to halt construction, and Chief has an issued statement saying we're going to halt construction on these things until we solve the budget situation, or we get into a position we would like to have the budget in, and then we will move forward or anything like that. So that's another thing that's on the list, for things we need to, address with PR, is find out, like, has this shut down, or is it just on hiatus? How's that working? Were they contracting with outside entities to do this construction, or was it some part of tribal construction? And if those employees if there were employees working on that, are those employees on furlough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So.
Right. I think a good PR person might use a term like suspend rather than halt. Right. You get such a finality with a term like halt versus suspension, where you've got a lot of flexibility.
Right.
So, but we haven't seen any crowds of villagers, waving pitchforks and torches yet. And I think as the health department begins to offer up solutions and things like that, the public response will grow, whichever way, or both ways, I would presume. And then we're going to find out more the citizens' temperament on some the ideas that are being discussed there.
Right. I know the Eufaula Clinic is a joint venture with IHS, and it's my understanding that when we do joint ventures like that with IHS, it's kind of a you build the facility and we'll help fund what we think you need as far as personnel for X amount of time. And equipment, exactly. And so that may be something that we may need to go into negotiations with IHS to kind of facilitate that as well, and find out what exactly they will be paying for and what we will need to cover ourselves.
Expect some hardline reactions. They'll undoubtedly saying, well, we're only allowed by federal law to spend money for X, Y, and Z, so we can't do this. So that won't surprise me one bit. I think it's kind of an expectation when you negotiate with the federal government.
On the Eufaula Clinic too, if you go to the website and go to the timeline, and Jared, do you want me to bring that up?
Let's bring it up so people can see. I mean, what you're
If you go to muskogeemedia.com and then you go to Archives, Documents, and click on Documents, you'll end up on this page. And at the bottom of this page is a timeline that kind of shows you some history of legislation that has been made. And I don't know if I will be able to find this, but we're going to try. In one of these, it discusses funding for the Eufaula Clinic. And the funding to pay for it was taken out in a loan. Now, this loan is on both the Okemah facility, the Okemah Hospital, as well as the Eufaula Clinic. It is an $86 million loan on both of those facilities. One of the things we are getting is the loan agreement, because it's my understanding that this is a balloon loan, which means we are only making interest payments until the end of the term of the loan, and then the full note is due. So that full $86 million is due. In this timeline, it also shows approval by council for things like the architect for the Eufaula Clinic, for plans for the Eufaula Clinic, and things like that. So here's where, on July 30th, 2014, this is where council approved that loan for the Okemah Hospital and the Eufaula Clinic. Further down in the timeline, here's the loan, the $86 million loan approved on December 11th, 2014. Also in here, it'll say who was approved as architect, who was approved, and how much they actually received. But this is something that that we wanted to provide for the citizens in order to see. On this section right here, Gary, we were talking about the Okmulgee Emergency Room and improvements to the Okmulgee Memorial Hospital. On March 3rd, 2015, the council appropriated $3 million for that facility. And so since they have suspended construction, which is our understanding just by driving by the facility, it'll be interesting to see if we continue on with that emergency room. On March 3rd, 2015, the council approved $725,000 for the architect and the engineer for the Eufaula Clinic. This is what I was looking for. So that was held over a year ago when we approved the architect to draw up plans and stuff for that clinic.
You know, it's amazing as we're running through all those headlines, you can see all these flags, these red flags there, and thinking, oh my gosh, if the council had been aware of a situation that we know of now, you know, would any of this ever happen? Hindsight is always 20/20, I guess, here, but it's just amazing to see this progression.
And that's why I wanted to put it in a timeline and get something visual for the citizens to see. I know we talked about this yesterday, and we posted kind of a teaser photo of my office, and I have sticky notes. You've seen it, Gary.
Right,
I've got sticky notes
line.
going exactly along the yarn line to kind of piece together the timeline and when these were approved by council, when the groundbreakings were, when the audit report was complete. So we knew that health was in a budget, and those documents that we've been using for those are on our website if citizens would like to go and see.
You know, it's things struck me as things like this presentation that we've just gone through. It could be that this kind of thing is on the line with our particular budget situation when we start looking at the kinds of things and places where we'll have to cut back. You know, bang, there it is, folks. You know, the information is right there in front of you.
Well, Gary, for us, it's going to be a lot worse than that. Like, they won't lose that because that's free. They'll lose the guy who made that, which is me.
Yeah, and you know.
So I mean, if we have to do drastic cuts like that, they're not going to lose a graphic. They're going to lose the whole stream or the whole. You know, like it'll be a much more dramatic than. You know, like even that, like our department is so small that, you know, a 10% piece out of it is going to be painful. You know?
Well, where I was going is it's ironic that we're in a time and place now where we're sharing this information.
Yeah.
We're able to dig it out and put it out there in a fashion where our citizens can have access to it. And because of no reason no fault of ours, you know, we may be looking at losing the very thing that we've just achieved.
Well, we're going to do what we can do, you know, as far as that, and hopefully what we have to cut won't be personnel. Most of what on our, you know, with our particular sections, the radio and the TV show, so like we have to pay to get the TV show aired on TV. But all of the equipment and all that stuff we've had for a long time, and the YouTube is free, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, so if we can make cuts that we can not cut personnel, we can still get it out in some form. So it will be limited access for the citizens because, you know, some citizens aren't good at going on the internet and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, the radio show is really an avenue for a lot of the elders to get the news from the tribe. That because they can't do that, you know, and so, you know, it's not going to be like the end of the world, but it'll be close.
and it may be the same thing for the paper too. You know, we put out a paper twice a month, and it may be one of those things that we have to take away one of those editions. Yeah. Because, you know, we have to pay for the printing costs and the mailing costs to get those out to citizens because they're free of charge.
Yeah. We have another comment in the chat.
Okay.
Shadowcat X2000 says, do we have who voted what way on those appropriations? So
yes, we do. I actually have all all of those pieces of legislation on the timeline. Now, it's a lot of legislation, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't upload that. Do you?
Well, I think for that, this is what I would suggest. We know that if the Attorney General's office goes digital, are they going to publish that stuff? Are they going to publish appropriation legislations? They're just going to handle code aspects, right?
Yeah, they're just going to handle code.
How did we get
what I had to do is I had to contact National Council and actually get the legislation. So, on the back of the bill, it actually says, like, for example, on the 2016 Comprehensive Annual Budget legislation, it says, that the provisions were adopted by a vote of 15 in favor, 0 against on this piece. Now, when it won't say who voted against it. So, right. For example, if there was one where it was 14 in favor, 1 against, it won't say who voted against it. Right. But what I've done on those pieces where there was someone against it is I actually contacted council or dug through our coverage, right, and said, okay, Councilman X voted against this piece of legislation.
Right. If we can take this back several years, because I know we've been doing this as a practice, but anything before then is going to be a rather tedious task. I think, right, sitting in a national council's office and greeting their folks every morning. Hi, can we go through your books again? And then having to go through it the hard way.
Yeah, and a council's official position on this situation is that they didn't know about it, that they hadn't received the audit. So even if we got into a situation where we had a councilman voting yes or no on an appropriation, in that situation, the councilman's going to say, well, I didn't know what we're just, I didn't have the information that we're discussing. Of course I'm going to vote yes on this because it looks like something good for the citizens.
Yeah, that's a legitimate response because they didn't know. They weren't being supplied with this information.
One of the questions that I'm asking for the health story is, when did the council get the 2014 audit of the nation? It's got a date on it of June 2015. And then shortly after that, if you go to the timeline, you'll see that when that report was published and when health approached council and said, we're in a deficit for contract health, and asked for $4 million, and we're appropriated $4 million for contract health. And so one of our questions is, did you see this audit? When did you see this audit? Because after that appropriation, you'll notice on the timeline, there are more appropriations for health for spending.
Yes.
And so that's something, and with the councilmen that voted for or against this, one of the things you also have to consider is this spans 3 national councils, well, maybe 2, because this goes back to 2013. And so there were 2 different elections in this time span where we may no longer have those council reps on the council anymore.
Right. And the other problem with it is the council the council says we don't know about it, but we still haven't heard why didn't, what's the explanation for why you didn't know about it? Well, we were told this and we were told that, and some of it's a little contradictory if you go back and look at the YouTube coverage, and like we spoke about on the last stream. The actual meeting that we posted to our YouTube channel, has... Tom has another question. Going back to the printing and postage of the Muskogee Nation News, what does it cost to print and send out each issue of the Muskogee Nation News?
It depends.
I actually have that.
Do you?
Well, I don't have the actual cost per issue, but I believe that in that budget information we were looking at earlier, let me pull it up, it will have the cost of printing and postage for the whole shebang.
One of the things that happens with us is it changes each edition, because we may get a phone call in from a citizen who's passed away or no longer wants to receive the paper anymore, and so we remove that citizen off the list and no longer have to print or mail to that individual. And the opposite happens too. We get citizens that call in and say, hey, I want to subscribe to the newspaper, and so they're added to the list. Now, we budget a rough estimate of what we're looking at doing, and it also depends on the page size too. So if we print an 8-page edition, that's going to be cheaper than printing a 12 or 16 page edition. And so it really varies with how much news we have.
Okay.
And before you jump into that, this is first class
yes,
mail. It's important to put that out there.
And that's part of the thing with the newspaper as well. And I could be wrong on this, so this is just based on my memory. I believe that per the code, the tribe is required to have a newspaper in order to publish things like legals and things like that. Legally, the tribe has to have a newspaper. Right. Now,
The cost is $50,000. That's what we have budgeted in our budget for.
And that's for the entire year.
Printing and publishing. Let's see if that. Let me check the justification to make sure. Yes, printing. This line item will be used for printing charges for the Muskogee Nation News and one tribal service directory. The line item has increased because of the Muskogee Nation News being done in color, and et cetera, et cetera. So we, let's see here, let me get the other one back up. That's what it would cost. So if we didn't print the paper and didn't ship the paper at all, that would only get us to $50,000. And our rough estimate of the amount that our department needs to cut is $185,000.
Yes.
So it's substantially more than the cost of printing the paper.
And if this is another thing with us, we don't. We pay for personnel and we pay for things like publishing the paper, for broadcasting the TV show and the radio show, and then we've got a few other line items that are very, very small as far as equipment and other things are concerned. So really, for us, for our department, it comes down to one of two things.
Postage. I'm sorry. Postage.
Postage. Yes.
We forgot postage. Postage is $150,000.
And we're required per the code to.
Well, postage went down from fiscal year 2015 to 2016. Postage went down $5,000. So, if anything, the 2016 number is going to be the lower postage. Probably because, let's see what it says in the justification. Postage equals cost associated with the first class mailing of 8,000 copies of Muskogee Nation News on a bi-monthly basis. First class mailing allows Muskogee Media the opportunity to be notified of undeliverable mail from the U.S. Postal Service, thereby allowing us to delete these individuals from the mailing list. Also, first class mailing allows our tribal citizens to receive the newspaper in a timely manner. And then it says, what is this? It says income budget is costs associated with special projects that require mail-outs, such as official tribal calendars and service directory.
I think the word timely manner, that phrase is really important there.
So that's...
Back when I started in this business, so to speak, most we ever saw were monthly publications or quarterly. And I always find myself sitting there looking at this and saying, darn it, I wish I'd have known that 3 weeks ago. And that was accepted as being the only way we could do that. But now we've got the paper that's out twice a month, and we've expedited that timeliness factor considerably. It's not perfect. If it was perfect, we'd be doing it daily and everybody get it instantly, but that's not going to happen. So twice a month, our citizens can be informed of some of the latest news and in a more in-depth fashion. So that's what sets a newspaper apart from the broadcast media, is it's there. You can read the story, you can throw it down, walk away and go feed the dog and come back and pick it up again. Whereas with TV and radio, unless you record it, it's gone. It's like there in the flash, and the material and the content may not be anywhere as detailed as in the newspaper.
And that's the problem with the visual aspect as well as the radio aspect. In a written aspect, and I get made fun of a lot of times because I'm very detail oriented, and if you read some of the stories that I've written on complex issues like this, there's a lot that goes into that, and it's hard to comprehend unless you're actually reading it. And that's one of the things about the paper is that a lot of people don't understand is our deadlines. Our deadlines are actually a week before the edition is actually mailed out. So on the 15th deadline that it's going to be mailed out and citizens have that edition, our deadline is the 7th of that month, and so
Right.
some of that content is already old by the time it gets out to citizens. It is something that we may have to consider. We may have to consider cutting back to once a month, but I don't think we can cut the paper altogether, because I do believe that is in the code that it's a requirement.
Well, one of the things we're going to try to do too, and speak to the board about doing, is once the board has their suggested cuts and what they've okayed to cut from the budget, we're going to ask the board, is it okay if we publish this to our website so the citizens can see what we submit on April 22nd, what our budget is, what everyone makes, what everything costs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then citizens can go back through our budget and say, well, these cuts that the board have suggested is fine, but we prefer this, or however, whatever comment they would like to make, and we could pass that on. And then, because that's total transparency all the way down
Right.
to like every single thing. I think a lot of citizens will be really surprised at how low the budget is for this department. It is rock bottom. Like we're talking about $200,000 for postage and printing of the newspaper, and that's almost like that's very close to the fringe for all of the employees here. Like that's saying something. Many of the people who work at Muskogee Media do multiple jobs,
Right.
and they wear many hats. And so even within the separate divisions, like the video section only has 3 employees. The paper has what? 6? Is it? Let's see.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 employees.
What we're saying here is that essentially about 7 or 8 people are pumping out an incredible amount of information
Yes.
for our own people. And as you say, we all wear multiple hats. Like here we are sitting here on TV, and just today we were in the radio studio.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I'll be finishing my newspaper story and my little column thing. And we've got a lot of people who can do all of those different things. So just putting in a plug for ourselves here, you're getting a lot of bang for the buck from this group of people. I mean, I think we outperform any other tribe in this state easily, including the Cherokee.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of fat in our budget, so.
No, it'll be difficult.
Yeah, but
the citizens, one of our objectives here is the citizens are going to be along with us along the ride, and we're going to approach other departments too and say, hey, what are you guys going to cut? Whenever after that April 22nd deadline, if we can get it from Chief's office or whoever we can get the comments from, we're going to try to find out what's going to happen, come October 1st, because that's when all of this supposed things will take effect. There's still a possibility that Chief is going to come in and look at the budgets that are submitted on April 22nd and do an evaluation period where he says this department needs to cut more from here, or this department we need to provide this service and not concentrate on this service, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very high possibility that will happen. And so, we're going to stay on top of it. We just wanted to try to, hop on top of this for today, because that's, you and I had spoke about it on the radio program, and right after the radio program wrapped, said, we could easily do an hour on this issue, if not more.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Who knows, we may be able to do that. That particular venue is wonderful because it's a live program. It's right there. We've had the chief on for an hour, and he took questions, and we put him through the ringer, so to speak.
Yeah.
But that isn't going to happen much if we have to cut back. I mean,
well, that's why like we were saying, like that. I would love to have Chief come in and just do an interview with us just about this executive order and what he wants to see happen, just to kind of like chew on his ear and find out, because when we read the executive order, one of the things in the executive order is it outlines how respective departments will hand their budgets in to their cabinet member, and that cabinet member, you would assume, is going to brief Chief, and they're going to have a meeting. We don't have a cabinet member because we're an independent agency. So literally right now, we don't have any person that is in Chief's office or in Chief that can speak to Chief and say, hey, this department, this is what their budget looks like. You know, like that this is how they do everything that they do, you know. And so, and because we're the press, we're kind of in this limbo area where we can't tell Chief, or like that's the debate that we're having now, is should we notify Chief that this is going to be pretty damaging to the department and also going to affect the amount of news that gets out no matter what happens, because if we cut personnel, then you're going to have a reduction in the amount of things that are reported, and if we cut airtime, you're going to have a reduction in the number of things that are the number of venues that people can receive the information through. And there's not, I mean, I don't know how you would cut anything from our budget if you're going to not do one or the other of those things, you know, like even if, like we were discussing before, preliminary ideas that were floated. So one of the basic things that we would have to do no matter what is cut our travel budget. And if we cut our travel budget, that means we don't travel anywhere. You know, we were talking about also cutting the tribal vehicles, so we wouldn't even be able to use tribal vehicles because we have to pay a fee back to the nation to rent those vehicles.
Right.
So it's
and that's something else that is a part of our budget too, and it's really part of every department's budget, I believe.
Yeah.
Like we pay rent for the building that we utilize for the tribe. We have to pay for the phones that are in our department.
Yeah.
Everything. It's almost like we have to budget as if we were operating solely ourselves and not depending on anything else that the nation provides. All of those costs come directly out of our budget.
Yeah. And today was the Wednesday meeting that we had referred to in a previous broadcast that was mentioned in the executive order for independent agencies to go attend a budget meeting. So we sent Wilma Murphy, our office manager who handles our budget and everything, to the meeting. And when she got back from the meeting, you know, I was like, what was it like? Because I know we were all debating, maybe this is going to be a meeting where Chief is going to say different executive agencies, you know, you guys handle things like this, or don't worry about that, or whatever, you know, like something specific for independent agencies. And I asked Wilma, you know, like, what was the meeting like? She was like, it was just like every, you know, the budget meeting they have every year. There wasn't any specific information. I was like, was there any specific information for independent agencies? And she was like, no, it was just the regular budget meeting they always have every year.
Here are the deadlines, here's the form you fill out, and things like that.
Personally, I was kind of hoping that we would get something out of that, because I was like, you know, that's the first time I had seen it referred to in executive order, even though that is a policy that they do. So that ended up being no new information there. So
where do we go from here?
We got 3 minutes left.
Well, you know, just looking at
yeah. Do you want to tell the story of what happened yesterday when we wrapped 3 minutes early?
Well, it's
actually go on the record.
Yeah. I'll go on the record. We actually ended early, and we were waiting for Chief's statement regarding the budget, and we went off the air because we had nothing else to kind of discuss. And it wasn't 2 minutes after we went off the air, there was the email with Chief's statement.
Yeah. That's our
luck.
I was saying in the stream, I was like, we don't, you know, like as soon as we wrap, we're gonna get that email. I can feel it, and that's what happened.
There was someone in his office saying, "Okay, great, they're off the air. Bingo, execute." Yeah.
Well, yeah, they could have said, you know, like they're fixing to go off the air, and they sent it. But you know how our email, it takes forever for the email.
Right.
To come in,
well,
so.
At least it wasn't at 5:15.
Well, we're getting close to wrap time.
There's a couple of things that will be ongoing. I encourage everyone to go to the National Council's website. That's www.mcnnc.com. The committee meetings will be happening here in the next week. I believe I have emails that they have posted the HUE committee agenda as well as the LNC committee agenda, and so you should be able to view those on the website and see what legislation is upcoming.
And I got one more thing for the audience. When the live stream is shut down, there will be an amount of time that the video has to be processed. But then, and it's typically like 30 minutes or 20 minutes. But after that processing is over, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can look at our YouTube videos, and the stream from each day will be in that playlist. So you can re-watch a stream, or if you want to tell another citizen about that and say, hey, you know, like I watched this and they said this on the stream today, you know, like you can send them that link from that. It just takes a little while. So even if you go to muskogemedia.com and you click on the stream post that we have and it says it's offline, you can still get the previous video if you go to our YouTube channel and you look at the video uploads there, because that's where these streams will appear after it's all over. So everything we do in Indian time is going to be recorded and placed on YouTube almost pretty close to within the hour. So in the future it should be a good resource, and we're trying to pump up those views anyway.
Right.
Did you guys hear the website update about the hits? So we had I think it was 4,000 hits on Monday on the website.
Oh, right.
So it's going up. Like I think the previous day's hits was like 700. So the days that we started the live stream, I'm hoping that this live stream will help push that traffic up. But more people are coming by the website and they're clicking on things. Documents page was like number 5.
Yes.
So a lot of citizens are coming, looking at the documents page, downloading things, and that's what we're trying to do. So other than that, it's 4:30. So
awesome. Well, tune in tomorrow, 3:30 Central Standard Time, here on the Muskogee Media website. Again, like Jared said, you can go to the YouTube page after it's over. If you miss the stream, go to the YouTube page and watch it there. It may not be live, but it's still good information. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow.